Hey guys, before I get started, I just want to say I hope everyone's safe out there. The world's kind of crapping itself at the moment, so I hope the next 5 to 10 or however long this video ends up being provides a pretty healthy distraction for you guys, gets us talking about something other than COVID. So to that end, I've actually been looking back. I've been looking back to where Shifting Lanes started, a humble blog, to a smallish YouTube channel with over 40,000 subscribers. Thank you so much to all of you who have subscribed. And if you haven't and you like this video, consider subscribing at the end. But looking back, I wanted to basically rank all of the cars we have owned since forming Shifting Lanes. We've all owned other cars before we started doing this that weren't great or weren't terrible. They were just cars, modes of transportation. Hanson had an Evo. He also had, I think, a Ford Tempo, something to that effect, a really horrible compact car. I personally owned 2 Ford Focuses before my Lexus. I know Greg had a Ford Taurus and a Honda Accord before he actually started driving anything that's remotely interesting and things like that. But for the sake of the next few videos, I'm going to be ranking the top 10 cars that we have owned since starting Shifting Lanes. A couple quick things before we get into the list. Number 1, there's a few cars on there that we're not going to be listing. Number 1 is the 240, simply because it's barely able to move under its own power at the moment. It's actually out in Oregon right now getting restored, which is really cool. None of us have really gotten the chance to really deep dive that car, drive it, see what it's all about, and all of that. Second car is Greg's XC90. It's only made a few appearances on the channel, and frankly, it's a crossover. Kind of boring, not really all that interesting. And lastly, the last car that's been featured on the channel but won't be on this list is Greg's former WRX. With all of that being said, let's dive right into the top 10 cars Shifting Lanes has owned since its inception. And we start with number 10, and that is my 2002 BMW M3. And before all of you BMW fanboys head to your keyboard and start smashing angry messages my way, I just want to say, the E46 M3 is hands down one of, if not the best sports cars ever made. No car I've driven, and I've driven a lot, have come close to really replicating the magic of the E46 M3. The seating position puts you really close to the rear axle. You get a really good feel for what the rear end's trying to do. The engine at low RPMs doesn't sound all that great, but when it starts to sing, it sounds like a miniature V12. They are awesome cars when they work. And that last part, when they work, that is the operative phrase here. And mine very rarely worked in the, let's say, I think 7 to 8 months that I owned it. Now, I did buy this car sight unseen through Craigslist, but with a caveat. I did have a friend down in Florida where I bought the car from go and take a look at the car for me. And the car had over 172,000 miles on it, so there was some stuff you'd expect. The body was in good shape, but not great shape. It had a little bit of an oil leak, which we thought at the time was a rear main seal that basically, because of the car's high mileage, had started to go. Whew, boy, were we wrong there. But it, it was a high mileage car. It was the cheapest M3, E46 M3 in the country at the time. I bought it for about, I think it was $75-ish, $100. So Hanson went down, he picked the car up for me, brought it back. I was super excited. I've always wanted an E46 M3, and it felt like pure torture waiting for him to bring that car back. When it got back, looked as advertised, but here's where the problems started. The interior, which was told to me was it just has some miles on it, was completely trashed. It wasn't the worst I've ever seen, but all of it needed to be replaced. Number 1, it was that horrible gray that BMW puts in its cars, and light gray leather I don't think has ever looked good in a car, let alone an M3. But I knew this going in. I knew the color of the interior. I'd already kind of budgeted in my head to buy a complete used interior to replace the gray one. So I wasn't too torn up about that. You know, she obviously was leaking a little bit of oil, and immediately, pretty much within weeks of owning the car, I got it down, got the main seal replaced, got the clutch and flywheel replaced, and we did general service items like, you know, oil change, filters, the spark plugs, all that sort of stuff. In my mind, I thought that was the end of it. Now I can do the interior and fix some of the body issues that needed addressing, and boom, that was it. We'd be done. We could move on. Yeah, I was wrong. To any of you who followed that series, you will know that that oil leak was a persistent bastard. And the one word or phrase or acronym you do not want to hear when you own a BMW is Vantage. It's BMW's variable valve timing system, and they're expensive to replace. In higher mileage examples, they can leak if they haven't been replaced. And I was told that Vantage had been replaced within like 30, 40,000 miles. So I wasn't really worried about it. Turns out I should have been, because it definitely needed replacing. So that was another thing that I needed to throw money at. And the list kind of snowballed, and the final straw in that car's coffin, the final straw, I'm combining metaphors. The final nail in that car's coffin was driving to a friend's house, doing normal driving. I wasn't on her, I wasn't doing anything crazy, and the driver's side caliper decided to seize, which made for an interesting drive. You know, it's never good when you start to see some smoke coming from kind of your end, like it was permeating through the engine bay, which gave me a pretty good scare. At this point, that I'd had enough. I'd more than doubled my investment into the car. I hadn't even addressed the biggest annoyance, which was the ratty interior, you know, that rattled, that had holes in it, that I didn't want to deal with it anymore. So yeah, I punted the car, I sold it. Best way I can describe that car is, think of the E46 M3 as Michael Jordan. When they're new and working correctly, well, that's mid to late 90s Jordan, just dominating people. My M3 was Washington Wizards Michael Jordan, a shell of its former self. In hindsight, I probably should have waited a little bit longer, paid a little bit more, gotten a more sorted example, but you live and you learn. I've now had 3 cars since then, and none of them have really been problem childs like the M3. The next car on our list, number 9, is, well, before I get into that, it's, I know some of you are gonna get mad by this. I know a lot of you probably own this car, but just stay with me here, because it was Hanson's Volvo S60 R. The P2 platforms are great cars. Just look at our V70 R, a wagon that has 450 horsepower, sounds glorious, the lot. The S60 R that we owned wasn't the best example of the P2 platform. It was by no means as bad as the M3 was, but she was almost as big of a problem child, just for Hanson, thank God, not for me. But she had a fueling issue that was that caused the car to die on the side of the street for Hanson, which you know, he has a habit of, and can't be very fun. I got to drive it a few times, and the overreaching issue with this car was the steering. Now, P2s in general, they steer fine for a, you know, mid-size sedan or wagon. This one had one of the biggest dead spots in any power steering that I've ever come across. Like, literally turn the wheel, nothing happens, and then it grabs. Like, it was really, really sketchy. The front end of that car was, it sketched me out, and you know. We tried replacing the tie rod ends. They were a pain in the rear end. We tried doing brakes on the thing. We couldn't get the rotors off. They had literally fused themselves to the car itself. It didn't have a lot of issues. It could have it didn't need much to get into real good fighting shape. But man, was it a pain to work on. It was the hardest car I've ever had to work on, and I only had to do a couple of the projects with Hanson. So I can only imagine the pure hell he had to go through trying to fix that car. Again, it's P2s are really, really good cars. It's just, you know, you buy a high mileage, cheap example of them, and you see all these shows about guys getting screamer deals on just phenomenal cars. Well, that's really not the norm. The norm is if you pay very little for a car, or a lot less than what most good examples are going for, chances are you're going to find issues, and in some cases, like in Volvos and BMWs, it's a pain and it's expensive, and waiting a little bit is usually the prudent course of action. But, you know, you live, you learn. Again, we've bought, I don't know how many cars since the M3, and knock wood, none of them have been as bad as the M3 or the S60. And that's pretty much it for this one, guys. I'm going to be making 2, maybe 3 more videos counting down my favorite cars that Shifting Lanes has ever owned. This does have my own kind of personal twist on it, with the caveat being that the cars kind of had to be important for Shifting Lanes as a channel. But like I said, 2 to 3 more videos. The tease for the next video is extremely fun cars that can be had for a bargain, comparatively speaking. So I hope you guys definitely come back for that one. If you want to find Shifting Lanes on social media, it's at Shifting Lanes. If you want to hit me up on social media and tell me what a complete idiot I am, I love those, they're fun. Can't wait to see more of those. I'm at Chanity83. If you want to help support the channel, head on over to our Teespring page. I don't know, I pointed that way, it's right below me. Every dime we make from selling those shirts, we put directly back into the channel. So it's a great way for you to help us out and get yourself some really awesome swag. I am happy to announce I'm going to be getting some new designs on there. Maybe not for the Mustang, but definitely some new designs that I think you guys are really, really, really going to like. So stay tuned for those. But, yeah, guys, that's pretty much it. Stay tuned for the rest of the list. It's been kind of fun making it, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. But until then, I'll catch you next time.